Welcome back to Drive Your Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Master Coach Carrie Marshall, and it's time to go after those goals.
Yeah, whether ready or not, life's coming hard, no breaks, no stop. And if you put me on the spot, don't get it twisted, I never drop. If you feel a bit out of control and out the box, here's a way that you could drive your thoughts. Turn this podcast on, it's a lock. Carrie Marshall on the clock.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I am excited to talk to you today about solo trips. Now, I know that it's summer and that a lot of you are going on trips, but when was the last time that you went on a trip all by yourself? Now, I'm not talking about traveling by yourself, which is what I see some people do, right? Is we're traveling somewhere, but then we're going to meet up with friends or we're going to a friend's house. Like for instance, I was in Dallas and I always travel to Dallas, but when I get there, I have a lot of friends. And so it's very different. So what I want to talk to you today about is solo travel, meaning that the trip that you are taking, you're actually traveling by yourself, but you're spending the entire trip on your own. So recently, I noticed that I was getting really overwhelmed with work. I was behind on a couple of projects. And so I was really thinking about, okay, how am I going to get on top of this? And one of the things that I realized was I haven't really taken a trip by myself in a while. And so I kind of started to think like maybe what would be really beneficial is for me to go on this solo travel trip where I could actually get some work done and then also just kind of reconnect back to myself, kind of check in, see where I'm going with my goals. And so I booked this trip to Hawaii. Now, some of you know how much I love Hawaii. I try and spend as much time as possible there. And so the reason I wanted to talk today about a solo trip is I think that it's important as adults that we have space and time to be by ourselves. Now, this really could be like a day trip, a hike or something like that. But what I really want to encourage you to do is set aside some time for like a long weekend that you can actually be by yourself. Now, here's a couple of things that I want to tell you about solo travel and your solo trip. Number one, if you're going to go on a solo trip, why don't you just maybe consider like really not consuming a lot? That means don't watch TV a lot. Don't be on your phone a lot. The reason that we go on these solo trips is really to check in with ourselves. And for a lot of people, that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to be by yourself sometimes because then what are we left with? We're left with our thoughts. And for some people, that can be really scary. I was actually up at a retreat that I was speaking at, and I was talking to some of the guys, and one of the guys said, like, I can't be by myself. Like it is a no-go. It's not an option for me. And I thought that that was a really interesting conversation. He said that even when he's eating by himself, he has to have YouTube on. And so I want you to just kind of ask yourself and check in, like, is that you? And if it is, no problem. But why is it that you can't be left with your own thoughts? What are you telling yourself, or what happens when you're on your own with your own brain that it is so uncomfortable, painful, scary that you have to distract yourself with other things? So one of the reasons that we do solo trips is so we can actually check in with ourselves and like have some deep thinking time to process our life and process what's going on. And that's exactly what I was able to do while I was in my solo trip. Is I got to catch up on work. That was good. But I also had a lot of time for some deep thinking time. And this was times when I would ask myself the hard questions, right? What do I not like about my life? One of my favorite questions to ask either my client or myself is, okay, let's implode your entire life. Everything's gone. Okay, now what do you bring back? Now, this is an interesting thing to say, because when we can actually ask ourselves this question and have some deep thinking time, it is fascinating to see what we say. So for instance, I was like, okay, implode my life. What do I bring back? And it was interesting to see what I was like all on board for, the things that came to me really quickly that I was like, yes, yes, yes. Like, for instance, I was like, okay, I'd definitely be married to Curtis right now. I'm like, yes, I say yes to that. Definitely want to be raising my girls. I want to be at home with them. Like, I want to be involved in their lives, right? So those things came really quickly to me. But there were some other things, like, for instance, we have 2 dogs. I would not have 2 dogs. We're committed to them and we love them. But if I imploded my life, I absolutely would not have 2 dogs again. And so it's fascinating to see those things that maybe we have in our life. And here's the thing, and it's the same with like even the dogs. Today I could go and get rid of a dog. Like that would not be a hard thing. They're both really great boys, but it wouldn't be hard for me to find another home for these dogs. But when we see that there are things in our life that maybe we don't want, then that's our opportunity to say, okay, so I'm going to use the example of my dogs. So what I was telling myself is like, okay, so I have these 2 dogs. Why wouldn't I bring back both dogs? Well, they're challenging. One of them is a little bit more hyperactive than the other one. They get really, really messy and dirty because they're always playing with each other. So they like all of these just things. They go through a lot more food. It's harder to find somebody to watch 2 dogs instead of just 1 dog. So as I was kind of circling through these things, that was then my opportunity to say, okay, and now what do you want to do about it? So if you're following this process, let's just kind of go back through. So when we implode our life, metaphorically, please, what we're going to say is then what do we want to bring back? And if there are things that we don't want to bring back, then we ask ourselves why. Like, why is this not working? And so when we can do that, then we can go through the list. Okay, well, it's a lot. It's a hassle with the dogs, this and this. Okay, then the next question is, what do I want to do about it? Now, for me, when I looked at my dogs, I was like, there's actually really nothing I want to do about it. Maybe just change my thought process. And even now, my thought about it is like, I committed to these dogs. Like they're part of our family. Like it doesn't matter that one of them's hyperactive and has accidents in the house every so often. I'm like, it sucks, but like I'm committed to both of these dogs. So when I got down to the what do you want to do about it, it was really like, I'm going to stay committed to them. Might change my thought about them a little bit, but it wasn't like, and I get rid of 1 dog or both dogs. So solo travel gives us this opportunity to actually check in with ourselves and with our life. Now, one of the things that I see happen is that, and because I've done this process so many times, I'm used to it. But I remember the first time I did this, a couple of times I got to a point where I was like, I kind of don't like my life. And it was sad. I was really sad about that. And it can be hard to go through these kind of bigger emotions, but that's one of the reasons that solo travel is so good, because oftentimes we don't allow ourselves enough time and space to process through these bigger emotions. Like we'll say something like, I remember one of my clients was like, I'm going to set a timer and I can cry for 10 minutes, but then I have to go pick the kids up. And I was like, what happens at 10 minutes? Are you done? And she's like, well, I might not be done, but my life needs to move on. And so that's another reason why solo travel is so important, is because we can actually start to like process through things at a better space where it wasn't like, oh, the timer went off, but it's like, do I feel like this is actually the end of this like chapter of this emotion? Can I process through something? Like on this trip, I remember like I cried myself to sleep several nights in a row. And it wasn't a big deal. I don't cry a lot, but I was just able to like allow myself to cry for hours and like cry myself to sleep. That was actually really healing for me. It felt really good. It was exhausting, but it was also really powerful for me to be like, oh, it's not a go and pick up your kids. It's like that feels finished now. That emotion, that experience that I needed to have, I got to play it out for as long as I needed to, which was really powerful. So the third thing that I want to mention about solo travel is it's so much fun to be able to experience things by yourself. Because now when we can actually have experiences by ourselves, sometimes I've talked to people about solo travel and then they'll come back and they're like, I loved it. I ate in my room. I stayed in my room. I did everything in my room. And I'm like, Okay, well, part of solo travel is adventure. You've got to get out of your bubble and you've got to go and experience things. So, one of the things that I loved on my trip was that I would just pick a direction, north, south, east, west, every single day. And then I'd just go in that direction until I hit an adventure that I wanted to have. And a couple days I had to plan ahead. I had to make a reservation for a hike that I really wanted to go on. Another day I wanted to go out on a boat, so I had to make a reservation for that. So it's really fun to be able to adventure by yourself because a couple things happen. Number one is you're not in charge of anything else. So one day I watched a mom get all of her kids ready, and it was like, do we have this? Do we have that? And I was like, I got my keys out of my car and I left. And I was like, this is amazing. I don't have to be in charge of anybody else during this experience. And so it helps us to reconnect to who we are when we're doing solo travel. Because then, like I said, as we adventure, we can really decide for ourselves, do I like to do this? For instance, I realized that I really do love kind of window shopping when I don't have my kids with me. Sorry, kids. I know you listen to the podcast, but when I have my kids with me, I'm always feeling like I'm filtering through, they want something, they need something, it's a lot. It's a lot to process 3 kids going into a store and coming at you with can we get this? Can we get this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. But when I was able to just window shop for myself, I don't think I ever bought anything. I didn't buy anything. But when I was window shopping, that was a joy. I had so much fun. I got to just go into places, kind of look around, no pressure, nothing. It was just me, no time limit. And so that was really fun for me to be able to do. So I want to encourage you to really think about taking a solo trip, whether it is a weekend or an entire day. But what I want to tell you is if you can make it a long weekend, that gives you enough space to actually kind of start to have great conversations with yourself. Because what happens is when you completely shut down and I would check in with my husband every night because I do think there's a whole nother safety aspect to it that we can talk about further, especially if you're a woman traveling. But I do encourage everybody to have a check-in time with their spouse or a significant other. But it was really good for me to not have my phone and not be able to, call my girlfriend to just kind of chat during the day or get on social media and scroll all day. It was so powerful for me to just be able to be by myself, get bored sometimes, get really anxious, get nervous, all of these different things. But what I came back to is that I actually really love me. I really love spending time with myself. I love the interaction that I have with myself, the experiences that I intentionally create. It was really powerful for me to be able to see a couple of different shifts that I needed to make in my life right now, even when I'm with my family, that I was able to actually acknowledge and recognize while I was on my solo trip. So, one of the trips that you need to schedule for this summer, or maybe when the kids get back into school, is really schedule yourself that solo trip that you can take so that you can just start to spend a little bit more time with yourself, asking some deeper questions, and then listening and processing through what you need to. Now, I wanted to have you come over to Instagram. Tell me, where would you want to solo travel to? Where is your place that you would be so excited to go by yourself and explore an adventure? I can't wait to hear where you all want to go. We'll talk to you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to this podcast episode. If you're ready to get in the driver's seat of your own life, you can come and follow me at Drive Your Thoughts Coaching on Instagram, or come and see more ways to work with me at driveyourthoughts.com.
Yeah, whether ready or not, life's coming hard, no breaks, no stop. And if you put me on the spot, don't get it twisted, I never drop. If you feel a bit out of control and out the box, here's a way that you could drive your thoughts. Turn this podcast on, it's a lock. Carrie Marshall on the clock.